Hello and welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about how to shade your models like a pro. Okay, so this is the TIE Fighter model that we used that we created in the Model Like a Pro tutorial that I've got up on the page. You can find it in links in the description down below. But I wanted to do a follow-up. What happens next? Once you model this thing, how would you actually create some materials for it? So we're going to do a deep dive into materials and explain this from the ground up. So the first thing to know about materials is where to find them, basically. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the central part of this mesh, and we're going to scroll down here, and I'm going to come to the Materials tab. So in the Object Properties panel, just bring this up a little bit. We've got all these tabs, and we're going to be looking at the Material tab, which is this one right down here. And you can see there's nothing going on yet at the moment. We've got the new button to create a new material. We've got this drop down, which will eventually list all the materials that we've created in our scene, and we can easily swap them out here. And we've got some slot buttons here. We'll talk about those in just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is before I click new, I'm going to bring up my bottom timeline here, and I'm going to switch this to the shader editor. So again, I'm going to click on this little drop down to create a new window type, and down here to shader editor, click that. And now we have the shader editor. Now the shader editor will show you by default, whatever you've got selected, it'll show you whatever material's on it. So there's no material on this. So there's nothing in the shader editor. And what I just wanted to show you by bringing both these up at the same time is that when you click new, here or here, it does the same thing. It creates a new shader and assigns it to this geometry, the geometry that you have selected. So let's start off. We're going to click new over here, and you can see two things happen. We get this shader view here and the shader view here. Now this could be a little confusing at first, but what you can think of this as, we've got the nodal views, so all the different nodes that make up this shader. But then those nodes are represented over here as well. So the information is just presented a little bit differently. It's not presented as nodes. It's presented as these little drop-down menus. So you can see here that we've got all this stuff matches the values here and the information we have right here. So that's the basic snapshot of what's going on. So as you make changes over here, you'll notice that the values are going to be changing over here as well. And so that means you can use both of these windows interchangeably whenever you want, depending on what you're doing and what you've got up. You can quickly make little tweaks just in the properties panel. That can be really useful to know. All right, so let's talk about what we're looking at. This node view is where you're going to really focus your attention when it comes to creating shaders. Now, we are right now using Blender 4.2. So I am going to be switching over to Eevee Next to preview the render, but the concepts that we talk about and everything that we go through here is applicable for Cycles, or it's actually applicable for other software as well. So this isn't just Blender specific stuff we're going to be talking about. This is sort of any 3D software package you jump into. You're going to apply these same ideas. There might be different names for some of the nodes and stuff, but the same ideas will still apply. All right, so let's go ahead and switch over to rendered view. And what I like to do is first check my render settings. So I'm going to pop up here to my render tab, check that I've got Eevee active. My samples are set to 16. I'm just going to keep it all at the default, but I do want to turn on ray tracing because I want to get a sense of what that could look like. I like to work on my shaders in a context of actually seeing it lit, and not everyone likes that, but that's how I like to work. So that's how we're going to do it. Now we don't have any lights or anything in this scene, and if we click this little drop down, we can deactivate the scene world here to get some of the built-in HDRIs. Now they give us different color vibes and stuff, but what I might do is just keep scene world turned on. We'll just leave it like this as the default. All right, now let's start working out what we need to do to make this thing look cool. So to make it look like a TIE Fighter, there's a couple of key values we're gonna have to dial in. So the first thing is I want to do is I'm going to select this main piece of mesh we'll start with, and I want to get the base color and material correct for the whole thing. And that's kind of a good way to start. It's just like aim for the base, what's the main material that's going to be on this thing. So I've got a reference image here of a TIE Fighter, so I can have a look at like what do the materials look like and how do they feel. So we're going to base that. So we're going to start off with this gray, this sort of gray metal thing that's makes up most of it. And I'll just bring this over here off to my other monitor so I can reference it. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the base color, the first part of the principled BSDF. Now, what is a principled BSDF? We should talk about that. This is a shader node. There's all kinds of shader nodes, and the principled BSDF is the default, the main one. It's really the one you'll use. So let's go ahead and take the base color. I'm going to click this color swatch, and I'm going to bring it down to like a bit of a gray. And it looks like the TIE Fighter's a little bit shiny. So we could use these next two inputs to dial that in. Now, what are these? We've got metallic and roughness. Metallic is cool because metallic will actually make the TIE Fighter look like it's made of metal, which isn't really how this looks. Like, so the reference image doesn't really look metallic. It just looks a bit shiny, but we might want to have a different look for ours. Now, in order to really see this, you see if I turn this up, we're going to get a cool look, but you're not really going to get the full vibe unless we have an HDRI in the scene. So I need to just take 1 second to explain what that is. And that's basically the world shader. So if we switch from the object shader, which we're in the shader editor, this is the shader that's applied to this object. We have this little drop down here and you can switch to different types of shaders. And there's really only 3 types here. And world is the second type. If I click this, you see we end up with this world here. And what this is by default, you've got this, right? And I've got this other bit from the previous tutorial. It's just the color gray, right? You can set this to any color and brightness. And this is basically texturing, picture a giant sphere that surrounds our scene. And this color is now on that sphere. And so it's actually lighting the scene. And as we turn the strength up, it'll get brighter and brighter. And so an HDRI is an important way of creating really a realistic lighting in a 3D scene. So in Blender, we've got a little drop down next to the render tab. We've got this cool option where we can deactivate the scene world, which basically means turning this off says don't use this shader anymore. Don't use this background shader into the world output. Just ignore this. Instead, use one of these built-in ones. Now these come with Blender and they're just a bunch of spherical photographs of different spaces. And these spaces bring different lighting into your scene. So you can go for the studio setup if you want, or you could go for this evening sunset thing. And we can rotate these HDRIs around. And you'll see they reflect the light and project light, from different angles. You turn up the world opacity to actually see it and turn down the blur. And now you can see here, I've got this space. Looks like someone's apartment or something, or a living room, or dining room. So you can see how it affects the lighting as I rotate this around. Okay, so this is really important for getting a look and getting things to feel right. So I'm just going to go with one of these. This one's kind of neutral-ish. I'll stick with this, I think, for now. And I'm going to turn the world opacity off so we don't see it. But now with all this stuff, and then this HDRI in the world, even though I've turned off the opacity, by the way, this is just turning it off from our view. So we can't see it, but the camera and the shaders, everything will still react to it. Okay, so now if I go back from the world shader to the object shader and we come over here to metallic, you're going to see we'll get a lot of the colors picking out from that HDRI. So the other thing is the roughness, and roughness is basically how rough a surface is. So, think of sandpaper, right? If you look at sandpaper, you're not going to see your face. But if you were to polish that sandpaper down until it was as smooth as glass, you look at it, you're going to see a reflection, right? So the smoother a surface is, the less roughness there is. So when you turn the roughness down, the more reflective it becomes. So this is a really key value. You're going to always be playing with roughness. So if I bring this down, you can see it's going to start to reflect that HDRI that we have in our scene. And that reflection, if I rotate back up here, you can see it's rotating around. You can see how it's reflecting the actual surface. So now with this roughness turned way down, we can really see these reflections. And now we can actually really see the effect of metallic. So if I turn this off, look how different that is, right? I could bring my roughness right down, right? So it's really reflecting quite a lot. And you can see it's got this kind of enamel feel to it. It's like a really smooth plastic almost. And that's really interesting. So that's a vibe. That's a certain, material style you might want to go for. But as I turn that metallic up, you can see it really does transform the surface into feeling like it's made of metal. Now, another thing that's really playing into this with reflections is this color. So we have really a bright color. We have this, really light gray. Watch what happens with metallic turned to 0 and roughness turned way down to 0.023. Watch what happens when I bring this down to black. So the closer I get to black, the more the surface begins to reflect. As we go white, of course, now we're going to lose the reflections almost entirely unless we bring metallic back in. And that's how you can get a chrome look, right? Go for a really bright base color and you set metallic to 1 and roughness really low, probably not all the way to 0. That's not fully realistic. But as you can see, as we bring roughness up, that reflection begins to blur more and more and more It softens out because what's happening is the light is hitting the surface and it's a bit rough, so it scatters. And so you're not getting that perfect one-to-one bounce straight to your eyes. If we go all the way up, we're really going to start to blur it out quite a lot. But you can see that as you slide this around, you're getting this like visual representation that helps you dial in specific feels and different types of materials. That's why it's so useful to create materials with a rendered viewport like Eevee's real-time viewport. So let's get specific to this object. I'm going to dial my metallic maybe just a little bit up, and I'm going to take my roughness down. I do want it shiny, but not fully reflective. And I'm going to bring it down a little ways, maybe about halfway, to get that sort of gray. Now, you might be thinking, okay, it looks kind of like, reddish. It's not fully just like that matte black gray that what we want, in this TIE fighter. If you compare the color of these two grays. But again, that's because we have this HDRI lighting our scene. If I switch over to something that's more black and white, you can see it's now much more in line. So bear that in mind, that your environment and your lights are going to actually really affect the look overall. Okay, so beyond the base color, the metallic, and the roughness, these three values are really the main ones you're going to use. Everything else below this, it's touch and go. Sometimes you'll use it, sometimes you won't. I'll explain these two since they're highlighted here, and we can move on and we'll talk about some of this other stuff as we progress. So IOR stands for index of refraction. You're really only going to use this for glass, but it does affect other things in your shader, but typically it's just about transparency. Can we see through it? The alpha is sort of like, well, if you've used Photoshop, it's, transparency. It's turning a layer down, making it more and more transparent, more and more invisible. So this is not like glass, right? Alpha turning this down is not going to create a look like glass, right? It makes it possible to see through the object, but light's not passing through it in a way that's sort of optically realistic. It's just like literally just making the thing more and more transparent. So it's more of a blending mode kind of effect. So typically just going to keep that set to 1. Let's say, we're happy with this. Let's go ahead and name it. I'm going to click on the name here, and I'm going to call this TIE base, just so I've got like an idea of what it is. And if you come over here to the material tab on the object again, you'll see that TIE base, the name is updated here and here. And if I click the drop down, we can see TIE base in the list. But now this is all one piece of mesh, right? But we've got these windows. We want a different material on those windows. We want a really reflective glass material. So how would we do that if we only have one material per object? Well, what you could do is you can actually have multiple materials on an object, and you can assign materials to specific faces. So let's do that. I'm going to click the plus symbol here, and what that does is it creates a new slot, not a new material, just a new slot. So you can see I've got this space here for another material. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click new to create a new one, and it creates a new one, but it's not assigned to anything yet. So if I make this red, nothing's turning red. So let's take this material. Let's call this TIE window. That's fine. Now we need to actually assign this to something, because right now everything has this assigned to it. So I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to go to face mode, and I'm going to select the faces that I want for this shader. I'm going to hit Control plus to expand my selection to get that group there. And then I'm going to click on TIE window, and I'm going to click assign. So that's the order. You select the faces, then you highlight the shader you want, and then you click assign, and it will assign it to it. So you can see, there we go. So now I'm going to just hold down shift and select all of these. Now you can see we've assigned this separate material to these faces. Now you'll notice here we've got these sort of gray patches, and these are coming from having a subdivision surface on our mesh. And this is a very common thing that you're going to run into a lot. If I turn off my subdivision surface, you can see it's quite clean. It goes right up to the edge. But when I turn it back on, we end up with that stretching. And what's going on is that those faces that we've assigned this material to are being warped and distorted by the subdivision surface as it creates more faces and sort of smooths everything out. So one way around this, there's really two ways. You can create more edge loops to tighten up these subdivision surface expansions that happen, and that will keep the material flush to where you want. Or you can also assign the material to more faces. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to select these guys, and if I hit Control plus, it expands once, but I'm going to hit Control plus again, and that will expand it one more time to an extra little layer there. If I've got a bevel, it's going to catch that bevel with that expansion. And now that I've done that, I click assign, and that should clean up the problem. Do the same thing for all these. Just shift select everything, control plus once, and then assign tie window. Bingo. It's looking much better. All right, so what does the tie window need to look like? Well, it doesn't need to be red. That's a pretty good start. So I'm going to drop the saturation down. So let's talk about these values now that we're staring at this section. We've got a couple of options here with the colors. You can type in an hexadecimal code if you've got a specific code for a color. Every color has its own code. We've got the HSV, which stands for hue, saturation, and value. And then we've got the RGB. Now, these are all giving us the same color, right? It's just 3 different ways of looking at it. The easiest way to understand is to look at this one and say, okay, we've got 0.8 of red, we've got 0.046 of green, and only 0.013 of blue to get this particular hue of red. As we move this around, you can see those values are changing. Likewise, we can come and directly affect these sliders to get exactly what we want. Now, if we go to HSV, saturation is basically how far out it is on this wheel. As it gets closer to the center, it's closer to white. So if I drag this all the way down, we're going to lose all color value and just go straight to a white or black value. And that's what value stands for. Value is basically where this slider is on the right. So as I slide this from 0 to 1, it's going to move from black to white. Hue is just basically where it is on the wheel. So if I drag my saturation up and slide that hue around, you can see it's going to do a little circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my saturation right down. I want this to be purely black or white. And then I'm going to take my value all the way down so that it's black. In fact, I'll bring it up just a little bit. One good tip about shaders is you don't want to go fully to 0 or fully to 1 with things mostly. Usually roughness and color and stuff. You want to make sure you just have a little bit of something in those. All right, now we're going to go with our roughness. I'm going to bring this right down so we get a very reflective surface. And we're not going to see a lot from this angle. There it is. There's the reflection. So yeah, I can see that. Now, one good trick with glass sometimes could be to turn metallic up. Metallic can give you a cool look for glass, but you will lose, it tints the color of the reflections. So that can be a little bit of a problem sometimes. So I think I'll just leave it like that. I like the roughness just up a little bit. The other option is we can go for a bit of a chrome look. That could be cool. We take our base color all the way up to white and turn metallic up to 1 and get that chrome feel. Might give us a little bit more of what we're after. Now let's start talking about the wings and what we might do with those. So I'm going to select one of these wings here, and I'm going to include instead of clicking new, I'm just going to grab the tie base, and that will automatically assign the shader that we already have to this wing. And you'll notice next to the name, I've got a number 2 now, and that's telling me that there are 2 objects in this scene that have this shader assigned to it. If I come over to this one and I click this drop down and I click tie base, you can see now we've got 3 objects that are all using tie base. All right, now what I want to do is I want to try and recreate the look that we've got here with these black sections on these wings. So I'm going to create a new material for these wings, and I'm going to isolate these faces and create a new material just for those, okay? So I'm going to go into edit mode, and I will click on this face right here, and I'll just go ahead and shift select each of these guys. I might control plus once just to expand that selection. And then I'm going to come over here, click plus, and I'm going to click new. And I'm going to call this tie wing dark. There we go. Now with tie wing dark, I'm going to click assign. Nice. Now I'm going to start off, I'm going to rotate my my world a little bit so I can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to make this base color, make sure I've got tie wing dark. Yep. I'm going to click this and I'm going to drag it right down. We're going to go for a really dark color. Now, there's something else that's going on with this shader. And if you have a look at the reference again, you can see these lines, right? So these lines are basically giving us what looks like some kind of a texture to these panels. So we're going to recreate that using something called the normal. So let's explain normals. Normals can basically be understood as the direction a face is pointing, okay? So you know, these guys are pointing that way. So their normal is that way. The top of this TIE fighter is arced upwards. Each polygon on this thing, as it has this curve along the top, has a different normal, each one pointing up in a slightly different direction, right? So it's a value that represents the direction a face is pointing. And the reason why we have a normal and a shader is because you can fake geometry by creating extra normals. So basically you can add to the normal that exists by putting some color values in, and Blender can interpret those color values as directions in space, and it will render the light that hits that object as if those directions actually exist, as if we had a lot more little polygons that were all pointing in different directions. All right, so the easiest way to understand this is just to go here and create a noise texture. And the node to do this is called the bump node. And what this node does is it converts any kind of black and white image or colored image, but it converts it to black and white as a height. So the dark values represent the low points in the shader, in the surface, sorry, and the white values represent the highest points in the surface. Okay, and it uses that low and high value to generate these directional information. So we could take this, right? Let's have a look at it. I'll plug it straight into the surface. Okay. And you can see here, we've got this subtle noise pattern. If I drag the scale up, we're going to get this sort of like cloudy look. And by bypassing the principled BSDF, we're not seeing this with any shading, shadowing, nothing. It's just purely what are the values inside this node. This is a great way to work, by the way, because it helps you just to focus on specific parts. So now if I take this, right, let's plug the normal in just by itself, right? So with no information going in, you can see these colors. They look, dark, red, purple. These colors, think of these as the red, green, and blue values representing X, Y, and Z. So depending on where it's pointing, you're going to get different values of X, Y, and Z, right? So those things are interchangeable. Red, green, and blue, X, Y, and Z. So keep that in mind as we talk through these things. So I'm going to take these black and white values, right? These black and white values, I'm going to plug them into the height. And now this bump node is going to translate these black and white values into normals. So if I plug this back into the surface, you'll see that what we end up with is this. Looks kind of like something you'd see with 3D glasses, right? But each of these pixels now contains red, green, and blue information that represents X, Y, and Z direction. So this one polygon has all this information now in it for how the light should react when it hits it, as if this was the surface. Hope that makes sense. Now I'll see how this works when we plug the normal into the normal of the shader. And then let's grab the BSDF here, and let's take the output and plug it into the surface. What's going to happen? All right, now as I move around, you can see that we get this like texture, right? It looks like this surface has this, pocky kind of bump to it. I can drag it up and you can really see how that plays out. And if I rotate the world, you'll see that the light is reacting as if this isn't just an image on a surface, but it's actually the texture of the surface. So that's how we can fake that without having to create lots of microgeometry to create the same look. So now that we've got that, the only other thing to understand are the two values on the bump node. And we've got strength and distance. Strength literally just turns it down. So it becomes less and less bumpy. It's kind of, the effect of it is like fading it off, basically. Distance is different. Distance is basically saying how much actual distance exists between black and white in this height map that you're giving me. And if this is a really huge object, like a mountain, right? And this is like supposed to be rocks along the surface of the mountain as we go up, well, that distance should be really big. It should be like 1, like it is now, right? So that means you look at the units of your scene, right? We have our length is set to meters. So this is a distance of 1 meter, right? Between the height and the depth. But that's not what this is. This thing isn't huge. This is a TIE fighter. It's much smaller than that. So we can make this distance much smaller. And what that's going to do is it's going to render this texture as if these bumps aren't as pronounced, right? It's going to bring the valleys and the ridges closer together so you get more of a subtle gradation. And you'll see it's quite a nice effect. So if I take this down to 0.1, a scale of 10 down, you can see that it's different from turning the strength down, because now it feels like those bumps aren't quite going as high, whereas this just fades it off. This one is actually changing how high they feel. So if I go, 0.05, you can see it's even subtler now. And as I move around, you're going to see that it feels more like leather, right? As opposed to this, which felt more like some kind of, rocky surface, basically. So I hope that makes sense, how those two values are really useful. Often you'll find in Blender, you turning this down to 0.1 to get a realistic look. Okay, now let's think of what texture we need to create to get those lines. Okay, now there's a lot of black and white texture, procedural texture nodes we can use to generate shapes. So if you go Shift A down here, you get the little pop-up menu to add things. If we come over here to texture, we've got all these different types of textures, and these are all different types of procedural textures, except for a few of them, like the environment texture or the image texture, which actually grabs like an image. But what we're going to do is we're going to grab the wave texture. And I'd encourage you to explore each of these because they all create different effects. But we're going to create the wave texture here. And again, let's do that technique of plugging the color straight into the surface so we can just see it. You can see we get this nice lined pattern. So we want to make it so that these lines drive the bumpiness of the surface of this, so we get these little grooves. So let's start looking at what that could look like. I'll take the color and bring it into the height. Now, notice that there's no color in this, it's black and white. If I take the factor, let's have a look at what the factor looks like. You see it's exactly the same. So the factor is basically a black and white version of whatever the color output is. But because this is already black and white, it doesn't matter. It's the same. So we're going to plug that in, and then I'll plug this into the surface, and we'll see what that looks like. All right, cool. So we get this nice, like, kind of corrugated iron wavy pattern, but we're going to make that a bit sharper, right? We don't want this like gradual rolling pattern. We want like lines. So what we can do for that is, again, I'll plug this back into the surface so we can just see it. I'm going to grab something called a color ramp. Now this is something you're going to use all the time. Now just drop it on top of this pipe and it will automatically hook it all up. Now with the color ramp, I can change the contrast and the fall off of the white and black values. You can see already what's happening here. It's tightening it up, right? So I can bring this right in. I can bring these really close to each other. And that's going to give me a much tighter image. There we go. So now we're getting this nice little divot that kind of goes down. Now I need to play with how deep this cut is. Is it too deep? Let's try 0.01. Let's really lighten it up. Now I'm going to take my base color down a bit more because again, this needs to be a much darker thing. And I want this to be really shiny and really picking up a lot of the environment. So I might try turning up the metallic and bringing the roughness down. There we go. So that's looking cool. So now we've got the same kind of patterns. Now with these patterns, you can see each of these is pointing in a different direction. These are pointing down, these are pointing to the side. So how would you rotate that? Well, there's several ways of doing it. They always involve something called a texture coordinate. So I'm going to create a texture coordinate node. Here it is. So we've got all these different options with the texture coordinate. By default, Blender is always using the generated. And what that is basically it's generating its own coordinates for the material. And a coordinate system is basically where it needs to place this thing onto the 3D surface. So think of the 3D surface, right? In order to place a like wallpaper, wrap it around something, you need to take a 2D sheet of wallpaper and wrap it around the 3D object and get it to line up, right? So the way to do that is to use this coordinate system. So we've got all these different types. They're worth exploring, but there's two main ones, which are the generated and the UV. Now, the UV is a specific sort of saved layout that you can create, a custom layout for how to place a texture. So I'm going to switch my view here. I'm going to split it. I'm going to bring over the UV editor, and I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to hit A to select all. And you can see that it doesn't look like we really have anything, but I've got these little points around the corners. Now, these are UVs, and they're laid out in a specific way. So we started with a cube. So these are actually laid out in the form of a cube, and it's kind of retained that, even though we've added all this extra geometry. Now we can unwrap this by hitting U, and that brings up the unwrap menu. And if I click unwrap, it's going to try to take this object and unwrap it and lay it out flat. And it's actually done a pretty good job. You can see here, it's taken all the different faces that we've got and it's spread them out. Now they are a little bit different in terms of their sizing and direction and shape and stuff, but that might actually be good enough for what we're trying to do with these faces. Another option is to actually look at the TIE Fighter from the orthographic side view. So if I come over to my little widgets here, you can just click on the Y, right? So if I just click on the Y on my little widget here, it'll just snap me into that orthographic side view. And now what I can do is I can hit U to bring up that menu. And there's another option here called project from view. If I click that, it's going to basically take this exactly as it looks from this view, and it's going to lay out the UVs in this way. And you're going to get some double up, like where you've got, like, for example, the UVs along here, like that are pointing away from that side view. They're just going to be flattened down to a single line. So it's not always going to give you the best result, but we're actually just wanting to affect these right here, right? We want to change the angle of these guys. So what I'll do is I'm just going to shift select the faces we want here. And what we can do is, instead of using the generated, we could use the UV and plug that in. And now this is going to start using the UV. So if I hit A to select all and hit S to scale, you'll see that that bump map starts changing its size, right? So we can scale it around a little bit to get the right size again. And then what we can do with this is we can grab, for example, this one and this one, and we could rotate these guys. So I can maybe rotate the first one until I get things going in the side. And I want to make this the same on both sides. So as I move my mouse, I'm looking up in the top left. So keep your eye right up here where I'm circling with my mouse. If I hit R, you can see that number. It says rotation, gives me a number. I can actually see the number. So I'm looking now at 3D viewport and I'm going, all right, where does it look pretty good? It's like, that's actually the right angle. So the number there is 58.6. So do the same here for this one. Rotate negative 58.6. There we go. So now it's the same, but just opposite. I'll grab this guy and I could rotate, probably the same value actually. Rotate 58.6. No, rotate negative 58.6. Yep. Okay, so we've done all this hard work on this side. How would we translate it so that it ends up this wing over here? So what we do is first we're going to select the one that isn't the way we want it to be, and then hold down Shift, select the one that we like. And now what we can do is we hit Control L. I'll just get a better view so you can really see this. Control L to link. You can also bring it up in the object menu or hit F3 and type link, but Control L, and we're going to link object data. You can see you can do specific things like just the materials, but we're going to go for object data, and you'll see what it does. It's going to copy the UVs and the materials and everything between these objects. This will also make the geometry the same. So if you had two pieces of geometry and you wanted to make them like the same, you made a little change in one and you want the other one to follow that change, linking object data will do that. So we click this and bam, it's copied it all over. So now these guys are linked together. So actually you'll notice if I go into edit mode and like grab this face, it's going to move on the other one as well. So they are copying each other perfectly now. So okay, so we've kind of covered all the basics now of shaders and what you need to do to use them. So when approaching a model like this, it's nice to have a little bit more variation. So let's just pick out a few little parts and let's just give them some slightly different colors and some slightly different surfacing. So I'm going to go into edit mode and I'm going to select these guys right here. Control plus, just to get that bevel. And I'm going to go to the material tab and I will click plus to create a new slot. I'll grab tie base, and I'm going to start with tie base as the base of this material shader. So I'm going to start with that, but I don't want to change the original tie base. So I'm going to click this double paper icon. What this does is it creates a new material that uses this one as its base. So it basically makes a copy of it or a duplicate. But now it's not assigned to anything. So if I undo that, create that new slot, grab tie base, you'll see we've got 4 objects in the scene that are using tie base. But if I click this, now that it's a new name, it's not assigned to anything else. So this is now a unique color. So I can call this tie dark maybe. And then let's assign it to these guys. Let's give it slightly darker color like that. So now I can just dial that in however I want. And we might put that on a few other bits. We've made some great progress. I think we've really come out with a cool looking model and it's shaded really nicely. Now there's a few final touches that will really land it and make it look much cooler. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the main tie base shader and we're going to bring it up. If you're ever missing your shader, you can hit A to select all and then full stop on your number keypad or period on your number keypad to jump to what you have selected. And what I want to do is I'm going to create a bit of a mechanical plating to this. So I'm going to use a technique that I really love to use, which is using the Voronoi texture, which is one of the procedural textures. You can see under texture, it's just listed here, right above the wave one that we used earlier. And I'll just show you what it looks like. We'll plug the distance into the surface. And I'm going to grab a color ramp. And I will drop it here. Now, color ramp I can use, of course, to tighten up those values. But what I want to do is I'm going to switch this from Euclidean. There's a bunch of different styles to this one. And I'm going to go to Chibchev. And with that one selected, now you can see I get these like panel-like shapes. And I can use this to create some extra sort of sci-fi panel detail. So let's grab this one and let's go ahead and grab a bump map. A bump node, sorry, and I'll plug this in as the height. I'll turn my distance right down, maybe to 0.01, take that into the normal, and then take the BSDF and plug it back in. And now you can see we get these really cool panels. And if I turn that scale up, we get a lot of them, but I like this effect when it's got a low scale to it. So it just adds in a bit of extra detail. And then I'm going to go over here, I'm going to turn on Scene World, and let's go to the World shader. And what I'll do here is I will create a noise texture, a color ramp. I'll plug the factor into the factor, color into the color. Now, this is pretty much the same as the shader, so we still have that same noise texture. Instead of a scale of 5, I'm going to turn this way up. I'm going to go all the way up to 600. Sounds like this static-y kind of noise, and then I'm going to bring the black value up, and it's going to cut out more and more and more until I've got a bunch of stars. Turn my strength up a little bit. And now we've lost our TIE fighter completely, so I'm going to go Shift A, and I'm going to add a light sunlight. And I'll just rotate it around a little bit. And then I'm going to turn this sunlight way up so it's really bright. And there you have it. The step-by-step guide on understanding how to use shaders in Blender to create realistic materials quickly and easily for your models. I hope you learned a lot about the basics and how this process works under the hood. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments. I'll do my best to read them and get back to you. And please don't forget to join the Patreon, where you can get the full uncut version of this tutorial with little extra details and lots of stuff that I decided to cut out with the YouTube videos to keep them short. So if you want a deep dive and you don't mind long videos, joining on YouTube or heading over to Patreon is the way to go, because you can access to them on both places. So check that out. Also, you can get the project file, including this project file, if you join on Patreon at the 2nd tier and up this month. So it'll be available this month and next month, and that's it. So if you're interested in that, go check that out. Thanks again for watching, and thanks so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic week. I'll catch you in the next tutorial. Until then, see you later.